So we're going to go live in just a moment. Welcome to today's Fireside Chat series on how to grow a successful startup featuring David S. Rose. My name is John Wensveen, and I am the Chief Innovation Officer at Nova Southeastern University and Executive Director of the Alan B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation. Before we get into a discussion with David, I would like to take an opportunity to provide an overview of the Alan B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation. The Levan Center is a public-private partnership between Nova Southeastern University and Broward County. We are building an economic and education development engine that is an opportunity gateway for Greater Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, and South Florida with local, regional, national, and international impact. Our goal is to better link the South Florida innovation ecosystem by offering customized programs, events, and wraparound services to support the founder's journey from birth of an idea through successful exit of a company or global expansion. Our three themes include innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. Our four pillars are ideate, incubate, accelerate, and post-accelerate. Our six outcomes include breakthrough ideation, new technologies, a talent skills pipeline, new jobs, company formation, and scaling of early stage and young startup companies. We are launching a purpose-built 54,000 square foot facility in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, now under construction, and we look forward to opening this summer. Details of our progress can be found on our website at nova.edu/innovation. David, you've been described as New York's archangel, patriarch of Silicon Alley, and world-conquering entrepreneur. You are a serial entrepreneur, Inc. 500 CEO, angel investor, and CEO of the U.S. real estate market and executive chairman of Gust. You're also a New York Times bestselling author, including Angel Investing and The Startup Checklist. You founded New York Angels and had more than one successful exit, including Jump Bikes to Uber, Comixology, and you have to make sure I'm pronouncing that correct, to Amazon, Panjiva to S&P Global. You have funded more than 120 early stage companies with exits to Facebook, Google, Intel, and other industry leaders. I continue to read off the list of successes, but I think it's great to point out that this is a great segue into our fireside chat because honestly, there's just too much great history with you in the world of entrepreneurship. So welcome, David S. Rose. We greatly appreciate you being here today with our fireside chat. And I'd like to get directly into the questions. And feel free to give yourself an opportunity to introduce yourself as we get into the first question as well. So over the last... Do you want to go ahead and do that right now?
No, I was about to say it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here in this wonderful virtual space at the Innovation Center. So fire away.
Well, thanks. You're sitting in our investor pitch room right now. It's where the entrepreneur meets the money. So welcome to the Levan Center, and can't wait to show it to you in person as well as everybody else here in South Florida. Over the last year, there's been an increased focus on both the tech and startup ecosystem, especially in South Florida, due to the influx of startups relocating to our region. I would love to kick off our discussion today and learn more about your journey and what has made you New York's archangel.
First of all, there are two different things. And an archangel or an angel investor, as we know, is somebody who invests money into early stage companies and hopefully other stuff as well, hopefully supporting and guidance and advice and the like if you can, but primarily an investor into someone else's company, whereas an entrepreneur is someone who starts a company themselves. So I actually happen to be both. So I am an entrepreneur, and an entrepreneur being defined as, a person who organizes and operates one or more businesses, taking on greater than normal economic risk to do so. That's the dictionary definition of an entrepreneur. I happen to be a fifth generation entrepreneur, which is interesting. So I go by it naturally in that sense. I started my first company when I was about 10 years old. I was doing multimedia, back then defined as business cards and printed posters and stuff, for my brother, who was a magician and did children's birthday parties. And so then I kept doing things all the way through school, high school, college, business school. Whenever you see an opportunity and a need, an entrepreneur says, oh, well, there's a need. Well, there probably is a solution. I can do that. And then you go out and do it. And so the primary defining thing for an entrepreneur is like Nike, just do it. And so whether you succeed, whether you fail, just as fishing is not about catching fish. You can be a fisher person, a fisherman or fisherwoman, and never catch a fish, right? So fishing is the art of trying to catch a fish, not the art of actually fishing. You can spend an entire day fishing and come back with nothing in your pail, and you still have been fishing. By the same token, an entrepreneur is someone who tries to organize and operate and grow and create a business. And if you fail, that doesn't mean you're not an entrepreneur. It means you're an entrepreneur who just didn't succeed in this particular business, and you can go on and do something else. All these things that I did. So for example, I'll give you a perfect example. Somebody on Quora, which is a website for question and answers that I have been addicted to and I've answered like 11,000 questions over a decade there about entrepreneurship and startup stuff and my background. Somebody said, "What's the fastest you've ever started a company?" And I thought about that and I said, okay, well, the first day I arrived at college, this is back in the dark ages when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I found that my college actually had fireplaces in the dorms, believe it or not. That shows how old it is. And also that I'm in the Northeast, not in Florida. And so there were fireplaces, but there was no firewood. Well, what good is a fireplace without firewood? It isn't. So here I am looking at all these kids moving into their rooms with fireplaces, no firewood. So I said, there's a problem. There's no firewood. There's an opportunity. People want firewood. So what did I do? Went into the Yellow Pages, which was a big book of listing of phone numbers in businesses before there was an internet, and found people who sold firewood. So I ordered up a quart of firewood. The truck came up about an hour or two later with a quart of firewood, dumped it on the sidewalk in front of the dorm. I then went and got to the local supermarket and got a bunch of fire starters and packaged them up, little bundled up, 5 or 6 split logs of firewood and a fire starter, and had a welcome to the dorm package, which I went around and sold to every other person in the entire dorm for their fireplaces. And at the end of the day, I sold out my quart of firewood. I had covered the cost of the firewood. I had enough firewood to last me for the rest of the semester. And that was the fastest startup in business that I've done. But again, that's entrepreneurial stuff. So then when I was in college, there was a print shop. So I took over that, and I became the head of the print shop and had apprentices, and we turned it into a real business. And then when I was being an entrepreneurial type, I was doing all these things during college. That was actually during the time when the space shuttle was first coming out. And so I realized that NASA had a program where institutions could get you could pay money to fly an experiment or something on the space shuttle for, several $1,000s. So I said, okay, well, how about if we, get this like 1 cubic foot on the space shuttle, and I then sell that, and we can have people can send up souvenirs, they can send up things to fly into space on the space shuttle. So that was my first space business, back 40 plus years ago. Turned out that ultimately NASA didn't allow commercial use of these academic square feet that they were selling, so that didn't work. But I did a bunch of other things there. I eventually actually did fly a product in the space shuttle. I created a product called the Wrist Mac, which ultimately flew an STS-43 and then became the Space Shuttle Watch, and that's a whole other story. So an entrepreneur is somebody who starts or tries to start or puts the energy into solving a problem and starting a business to do so. And having done that for much of my life, when the dot-com crash came along in 2000, that was not a fun time. At that point, I had a company that was a big multinational dot-com that I had started. We created the first wireless internet broadcast network, among other things. And when the crash came, many of your listeners and viewers of this probably don't recall, because either they have blocked it from their memory or they weren't old enough to be there, how bad that was. To put things in perspective, boys and girls, during the dot-com crash, Amazon lost 98% of its value. 98% of its freaking value. That was bad. So if Amazon lost 90% of its value, everybody else got wiped out, including my poor little company. At which point, there is this hierarchy in startup world, and the highest authority, of course, is the so-called spousal authority. At which point, my spousal authority said, "That's it. I'm pulling your entrepreneurship card. No more starting these crazy high-risk companies." And so that's when I went over to the dark side and became an investor. And that's the archangel piece, where I became an angel investor and started investing in early-stage companies. But you can't keep an entrepreneur down. So as an investor, I founded an investment group of other investors to make it easier, and that was New York Angels. So today, New York Angels is one of the most active and largest angel investment groups in the world. And we were investing in all these startups. And that was very inefficient too, because you were getting business plans by email and sending them around and meeting in person and trying to do all the stuff. So I said, oh, that could be easier. There should be a tool for that. So I ended up creating my next company, which is the one you mentioned about Gust. And so today, Gust is the infrastructure backend platform for a majority of the world's angel investor networks. Over 750 angel investor networks use our platform to accept applications in, manage their deal flow, collaborate on deals with each other, handle their due diligence, track their investments. And that's been going on now for 17, 18 years. And we've worked with over 1 million startups during that time frame. So the goal for an entrepreneur is to see a problem, not really find a problem, right? Entrepreneurs walk down the street, and I and every entrepreneur I know, you're walking down the street, you can't help but look at things and see, oh, here's a problem. Well, if I were running the street light system, I would do this, or if I were this store, I would do that. And so figuring out which one actually makes sense. So at one point I was trying to decide between, am I going to do children's toys, construction punch list software, a digital watch, or whatever. And so you have all these ideas. You got to pick one and then go and do it. And I will now stop and let you actually ask a question.
Well, I have a number of other questions now, but number one, I am so intrigued that you started at 10 years of age and as an entrepreneur. You maybe didn't define yourself as an entrepreneur back then, but that's ultimately what started you on your track by the sounds of it. And the firewood story I love. And what I love about entrepreneurs, especially very successful ones, are the storytelling methods that they utilize, because I think you can learn so much from storytelling. And I'm also really intrigued that you brought up space, which really coincides with our recent announcement here at the Levan Center and Nova Southeastern University of our entry into space with the creation of the Level 5 space dock, and being able to successfully recruit Andrew Aldrin, who's Buzz Aldrin's son, to be our first director of our initiative that commences this summer. And I want to talk to you further about getting you with Andrew Aldrin to see how we can at least get our logo on something that goes into space, so that we can make our mark way up there at the same time. Did I mention that I was one of the founders of Space Angels, an angel investment network that only invests in space related deals. I was an investor in the Rocket Racing League, an investor in Zero G, which does zero gravity space flights and the like. And so, yeah. Oh my goodness, no, I love this kind of conversation because I didn't know any of that, and I'm fascinated. So we're going to continue that discussion offline, most definitely. And before we launched today's Fireside Chat, you and I were talking, and you brought up an interesting subject about entrepreneurship and who should be an entrepreneur, and should anybody be open to that opportunity, or does it take a special mindset, skill set? I'm curious where you wanted to go with that, because I think you have some thoughts about what an entrepreneur is.
I do. And it stems from, background in entrepreneurship, right? So I'm a 5th generation entrepreneur. I've been doing this my entire life. I have been on both sides of the table as a company founder, as an investor in early stage companies, running accelerator programs, running entrepreneurship programs. I'm an associate founder of Singularity University, and I founded the entire entrepreneurship, finance, and economics track at SU. So been on all sides, every conceivable possible side, including writing the books and stuff about entrepreneurship. So I have a very interesting perspective on this one. And what it boils down to is that I absolutely believe that anybody can be an entrepreneur, but not everybody can be an entrepreneur. And I'll give you, from my own personal experience, a case in point, right? I mentioned that I am a 5th generation entrepreneur, but the difference is this family, and I come from an insanely accomplished family. I'm actually the underachiever in my family, given all the stuff that you just read out. Believe it or not, everybody else in my family does even more than I do. But I am the only entrepreneur in my generation. And in each generation in this family, there's only been one entrepreneur, but there have been these broad array of other really accomplished people doing all these other kinds of things. And so why is it that I and my father, and in his case, it was his great uncle, the first David Rose after whom I was named, who was the entrepreneur in the family, going back in this interesting sort of genetic line, for it. So we are natural born entrepreneurs. I've always felt that there are 3 major types of entrepreneurs. There are what I call survival entrepreneurs, who are people who start companies and start businesses because they have to. I mean, if you are growing up in a country or in a society or a personal environment where there is no way out except to change your environment and your destiny, you do it, and you start a company. Somebody once mentioned that 40% of the population in Ghana are entrepreneurs. Well, that is probably actually the case. But there, if you want to get off the farm and have more than a subsistence life, you have to go out and start something, sell handicrafts, pump water, create a farm, something, right? And so those are people who do it because they have to do it. Second category are what I call natural born entrepreneurs. That's where I fall into, and my father. And these are people who have a different psychiatry from normal people. And having now been in this field and taught and written and been one and invested in them for decades and decades, my guess, and so I think it's as good a guess as anybody's going to make, is that the incidence of that natural born, quote unquote, entrepreneurship in the population is about 1%. That's 1 out of 100, which on the one hand is not a lot. 99 people on the street are not going to look at things the same way I do. On the other hand, if you say, 1% is not a teeny little bit either. If you have 350 million people in the country, that means you got 3.5 million entrepreneurs who are just as entrepreneurial as I am, who should be out there, who are the next Steve Jobs or whatever, doing stuff. So it's an interest. So keep that in the back of your mind as an interesting statistic, right? So then for the rest of the world, other than that 1%, it's a bell curve, I believe. Some people are more entrepreneurial as an adjectival form. Some people are less. Some people who never want to take any kind of risk, do a startup. They want to have somebody tell them what to do, and they want to do it and do it really well. On the other hand, there are some people who always are looking to innovate, invent, to do new kinds of things. So but the point I was making, the third kind of entrepreneur, so the first are survival, the second are natural born, the third kind are what I call self-made entrepreneurs. So these are people who are on the top half of the entrepreneurial bell curve, but they're not that crazy 1% who are just psychiatrically different. And so for those people, they typically have had a career. Those often are older entrepreneurs. They are people who have had a career, who have domain expertise, who understand a real domain, understand what the problem is, have thought about and innovated a solution, see a solution to it, and then rationally set up a business in order to solve that problem. The natural born entrepreneurs don't do it rationally. Natural born entrepreneurs just do it because they're going to do it and they're going to solve this problem without necessarily really thinking it through. They try and think it through, but they are not as deliberate about it. The self-made entrepreneurs make rational decisions. Entrepreneurs don't always make rational decisions, the natural born ones. And so I think those are the three sets. And the challenge is that our society now, at least in the last decade or so, has so celebrated entrepreneurship, dating probably from the whole, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, ethos mythology of creating these things, and then the Larry and Sergey from Google, and now in this generation, it's the Mark Zuckerberg and the Elon Musks about doing this. And those are, we hold these up as the apotheosis of this is the American spirit. These are our entrepreneurs. Everybody should do that. Anybody can do that, regardless of regardless of your color and gender and anything else. Sure, but there is not a block to say you can't do that. However, not every person, I don't care whether you're a white male college dropout or a black gay woman, and there's nothing stopping you for that reason. However, if the question is, are you an entrepreneur, either the natural born one who will just go out and do it, starting it as a kid, or the self-made one who does it rationally after all this experience? And those are the ones who should start companies. And other people who are entrepreneurial and want to be self-starters can, I think, take from example and understand how entrepreneurs think and apply that to their businesses, and can also work with those self-made and natural entrepreneurs as part of a founding team in starting a new venture, and so on and so forth. So I don't know if that's a sort of stream of consciousness. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's where I'm coming from.
No, it makes perfect sense. And you mentioned challenges, and I know this is a question that comes up all of the time. And I'm curious, as you build your companies and your own reputation, what has been your biggest challenge or set of challenges?
I think these kinds of challenges for entrepreneurship differ in each case. There are some things that are standard across the entire stuff. By definition, an entrepreneur is creating something that doesn't exist. That's what we do. So if something doesn't exist and you're pulling it out of thin air, that's always a challenge, because you see things, what you're creating, that somebody, and that's another thing, entrepreneurs see the end vision. They see the goal, and it's as clear to them in the same way that when Alfred Hitchcock was directing a movie, he could envision every single shot, every single line, the entire movie before he started. As far as he was concerned, okay, he then made the movie, he can go home, but he got paid to make a movie, so he had to make a movie. Similarly, Steve Jobs, thought of the iPhone And as far as he was concerned, okay, he figured out what the whole thing should look like, and he knew in his mind what it should do and how it should work. And then he got very mad at his team for not being able to deliver him this iPhone that he had envisioned, right? So bringing something into life and seeing something is challenging. Bringing something that you see and other people don't see is challenging, because it means convincing them or sharing with them, not pushing against their, things that they don't believe in, but helping them to see the world the way you do. And so that's why entrepreneurship has a whole lot to do, as you pointed out before, with storytelling and sharing and selling and pitching, because we entrepreneurs have a vision, whatever the hell it is. It could be right, it could be wrong, it could be Elon Musk going to Mars in 10 years, it could be something else. And the goal is to get people on board as part of your team, as your customers, as your investors, by sharing that vision and helping them come into, as was famously said about Steve Jobs, the reality distortion field around Steve Jobs, because that's, to him, that was his reality. It may not be your reality, but entrepreneurs work best when they can help you understand and share their excitement and their passion and their vision.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And I love your passion and your vision. And what I love about entrepreneurs is often we think big pie in the sky, and then there are things that come out of it. And I think that one of the challenges is being able to educate and communicate to different audiences that this is something that could actually work. And I know that's a challenge. So that really brings me to another question around risk, because I know this is something that entrepreneurs ask about all of the time. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what's the biggest risk that you've ever taken? And did it pay off for the good or not for the good?
Well, that's another interesting question, because again, entrepreneurs look at risk very differently from normal people. Because to entrepreneurs, what they're doing is not a risk. They actually envision the end goal. They see that if this, then that. So as far as they're concerned, it's just going down this path. And it may be a path that to everybody else looks insane, looks like there's no chance, right? This is not, as far as entrepreneurs are concerned, this is not gambling. And people who are not entrepreneurs so often, and in my own family, for crying out loud, and everybody I know say, oh, you take risks, you're gambling on this kind of thing, you're pissing your money away investing in these crazy startups or starting a startup, right? Except that for us, it's not a risk. I mean, it may be objectively, you may show that a majority of all startups fail, that people lose money. Okay, I got that. But what I'm doing, I am in control. I have agency. I'm in control of my destiny. I'm doing what I am doing. And therefore, if it doesn't work, okay, it didn't work because I didn't execute well, or exogenous factors affected it, bad luck, it was the wrong product for the market, I had the wrong idea, whatever, that's fine. But that's not perceived as a risk. That's perceived as just the sequelae of something, decisions that I made. Whereas people who are looking at this from the outside say, oh, you invested all your money in this crazy startup, or you put your life savings behind what you wanted to do, that's a risk. But we don't see it as a risk, right? So it's a very different kind of a challenge.
Right. And if you know something and you believe in what you're doing, and I totally agree with you. And I think it's been one of the challenges, especially in my younger years, especially trying to convince my family when I was taking risks that didn't look like risks. And I was willing to max out the credit cards and do whatever I had to do to make something work. And like you said, there are successes and there are failures. And that brings me into another interesting question along your own journey. And I'm curious, if you look back at your life and everything that you've done, would you have done anything differently along that entrepreneurial journey, or would you not change anything?
Sure. No, there are a lot of things that I would have done differently. So first of all, I happen to be a very unusual person in that my psychiatry is different from normal people's. I'll give you one little example, right? I am a happy person. When I say I'm a happy person, I mean I have never been stressed, mad, depressed, or upset 1 minute in my life since the day I was born. And so I think it's probably safe to say you don't know anybody else who has never been depressed or unhappy since they were born. My mother says that I was born with a little sun over my crib. And to the point, so it's actually an interesting psychiatric condition called euthymia or hyperthymia, where my mood level is set so high. I clearly, what you see here, you talk about passion and obviously my excitement and stuff. This is me 24/7. So imagine living with this 24/7. It will drive anybody crazy, right? So with that said, I'm happy with what I've done. I feel satisfied. I've tried to give back to society and create things over there. Sure, are there things I have invested a lot more in things that didn't work out? Following this, of course, it should work, and it's not a risk, and just put more money. So I would, in retrospect, have cut things off a lot earlier than I did in doing things. Number one. Number two, like you, maxing out the family's credit cards and to go do things. I have a tendency to get out over my skis on a not infrequent basis in everything I do, because it seems so logical, and if you only do a little bit more, it should work. Right. So I've clearly got over my skis. But probably the single thing not because I don't regret, but the thing I would really do differently is understanding as an entrepreneur the effect of entrepreneurship on everybody else around me. So because as an entrepreneur, because I don't see it as risk, because I'm a sort of living, walking, breathing version of the serenity prayer, right? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the power to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So that's my life, right? If I can change something, I'll go change it. I'm an entrepreneur. I have agency. If I can't change it, well, I'm not going to worry about it. I can't change it. So it is what it is, right? you move on. And so therefore, because I have a sense of agency, because I have that kind of serenity, and because I am taking what to me are not risks, but they are calculated, rational things. If it doesn't work out, okay, part of rationality is understanding that there is bad luck, that I can make bad decisions, that other things can happen in the market. So if it doesn't work out, okay, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again, right? So therefore, failure in that sense doesn't personally affect me negatively psychologically. But it turns out that that's a little abnormal, and it does affect everybody else around you. And so if there's one thing looking back on my career that I would want to change more than I have, it's understanding and being empathetic to the effect of people around me of my entrepreneurial things. I have zero regrets, even for all the money I've lost, the money I've made, the successes, the failures, the times, the fact that I haven't taken a vacation in 12 years. Okay, that's fine. That I can live with that. I'm making these decisions. The impact on other people near and dear to me of these life choices that I am making is something that I would probably change.
So I have to assume that happiness is infectious when you're around other individuals. I know that it would be for me, and you talk about you're a different person, which makes me wonder about the partnerships that you engage with and the success around those partnerships. So when you're considering partnering with a person or a business, what factors are deal breakers for you?
Number one, absolutely. There's one, and then there's everything else. Well, there's sort of one, and there are three or four, and then there's everything else. The one is integrity. Integrity is so absolutely freaking key. It cannot be overstated, right? So the motto for all of my companies, since I started my first one, back as a teenager, the first motto is everybody gets one chance to screw me, but only one chance, right? So I go into every relationship, every partnership, every business thing with the underlying assumption that people are playing as straight as I am, and that we are in a partnership together to try and do X, Y, or Z. And I give you the benefit of the doubt. And if you screw me, if you take advantage of that, if you do something that is the wrong decision, that is not based on integrity, based on doing the right thing, okay, fine. As Ben Franklin, who is my idol and hero and role model, said, experience is a hard school, but some will learn through no other. So that's fine. If you do make a decision that is not the right decision, not right in terms of effective, but not from the heart right, the integrity decision. Okay, you do that once and you're out. And there is never coming back from that, right? And so what that means is I have had the good fortune to have around me for a long time, partnerships where people play the same way you play, and then you're doing it for the right reasons. We all make. David Rockefeller, the former chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank, my family goes back, so many years. David Rockefeller was our personal banker back at Chase Manhattan Bank back in the 1940s or 50s or thereabouts, when he was early beginning on. He once said that the Roses make mistakes like everybody else, but the difference is that with the Roses, the odds are 50-50. The mistake will be in your favor. So. By the same token, I come from this whole heritage of doing the right thing and making for the right reasons, right? And so that is so critically important. And then so that's the first thing, right? that stands by itself. After that, you have the other kinds of things. And those are the things I look for in entrepreneurs in whom I invest and partners and so on and so forth. And one of them is pragmatism. Obviously I'm an idealist. You can't be an entrepreneur without being a sort of passionate idealist. But idealism has to be paired with pragmatism. So somebody who is purely pragmatic and transactional and does everything because that follows that and so on and so forth, they don't have the light in their soul. They don't have the vision, the lightness. They can't envision this better world as Elon Musk going to the Mars and Ray Kurzweil and the singularity and so on and so forth. I live in that kind of universe, right? So you want people who have vision, but at the same token, somebody who just has vision without any kind of pragmatism is a dreamer and, good, and go sit in your corner and dream big things and write science fiction, but that's not the real world. And so for me, the combination of idealism and pragmatism over a basis of integrity really makes for the kind of person who you want to work with. And then on top of that, you have a sense of humor. And if you can have a sense of humor, you're a person to be with. And those are the kind of people you try to accrete over your life. People who have high integrity, who have visions of a better world. We call it tikkun olam, looking to repair the world, but yet are pragmatically doing something about it and are fun to be with.
So, I mean, the passion and in our previous conversations as well, it comes through as it's glowing around you, which is what I love when you start to put other people that have that same set of characteristics around them. And it leads me into another question about your journey. And I think you've touched on it, but to take it a slightly different way, what would you have done differently, or what are you most proud of? And I guess it's really a two-sided question. Would you have done, we've already answered the question, would you have done anything a little bit differently? But what are you most proud of on that journey?
What I'm proud of, I think, is it's not making money, and it's not starting a business. It's been around for 17 years, and it's not my earlier career was in real estate development. So there was a 30-story multifamily apartment building in Manhattan that I basically built and close to my own two hands. And so those are things that you can point to and visible. But probably the thing that I'm proudest of is the effect to some extent that I've had on other people. I try and spend a lot of time mentoring. Why am I doing this Zoom with you, right? And so this is what I call, this is part of giving back. And the challenge of trying to mentor, different people mentor in different ways. I think it is incumbent on me to do the best job I can and to affect the biggest number of people, which means what I call scaled mentoring. And so, in life, many people I know, some people I know, have had a mentor, one or two mentors who have really changed the course of their life and helped them. And I've been very fortunate to have a number of mentors who have been there for me and done that, starting with my father, who is not only my father, he's my role model and my mentor, all wrapped up in one, and is a really, and raised me. So it's a really great guy. But that being said, I've had two or three other mentors in my life who have taken me under their wing and have advised me, and I have worked with, and that's great. And so I would love to do that to people. The only problem is that is insanely time intensive. And, most people who are mentors have in their entire careers, unless they're maybe a professor, and if you're a professor, you may have, 15 or 20 people who are your proteges. One of my mentors and closest friends and role models is a guy named Norman Lear, the film producer, the guy who created All in the Family and the Jeffersons and so on and so forth. Norman is now 97 years old and is still starting new projects at 97. So Norman is just a crazy guy. And so for Norman's 90th birthday, there was a big gala in Washington. I went down for this big gala. And I've known Norman for close to 40 years. And he has really been this beacon for me, this role model, integrity that oozes out of everything he does, right? And he's very pragmatic and a visionary. He encapsulates all the things I just told you. And so I have had this relationship with Norman that's really for so long, that's been heartwarming for me. I go to his 90th birthday party, and there's this big ballroom in Washington with probably 1,500 people. And one after another person gets up and says they have this relationship with Norman, he is their mentor, he's their role model. He's this. And I said, wait a minute, I'm not alone. You mean there are 1,000 other people in this ballroom who have the same relationship over there? So I think that probably defines the edge of the spectrum. I don't think there's anybody who has more people who consider them proteges than Norman Lear at 97 with 1,000 people. But if you say 1,000 people, while that is a number beyond imagining, it's still only 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And my goal is to try and help more people than that. So what do I do? So I spend probably half my time in what I consider scaled mentoring. And so whether things like this podcast, where hopefully we're going to have hundreds of viewers. So for whatever my thoughts and opinions are worth, that goes to hundreds of people that I couldn't do one-on-one. I answer questions on a site called Quora, where I have written over 11,000 answers over a decade about entrepreneurship and angel investing and everything else, parenting, New York City, real estate, all this kind of stuff, to try and help other people. I've got 100,000 followers there who follow my answers. These days, there's a new site that people may have heard of called Clubhouse, which is an online audio room. So I've taken to doing rooms on Clubhouse. I've got, I already have 8,000 followers on Clubhouse. I've only been on for a couple of months, but that's because weekly I run rooms and answer questions that people can ask me live, and I answer live about everything from entrepreneurship to investing in startups to one of the topics that I run a number of rooms on is the whole question of privilege when it comes to startup financing and funding, and how can entrepreneurs who are not part of this sort of privileged class that I am, how can they have the same kind of opportunities? And so, whether the two books and two New York Times bestsellers that have had, tens of thousands of people read them to get whatever advice I can give about these things, that's giving back. So I think if you ask what I'm proudest about over my entire career, it isn't any specific accomplishment or economic thing or anything else. It's the fact that I am proactively trying to heal the world and help other people.
So it's interesting. And again, I love the stories and Clubhouse. You are definitely one of the more popular people on the platform. And I've heard great positive feedback. And one of your successes on Clubhouse that I've heard is the fact that you're not just on a stage preaching to people, you're actually inviting people to talk and engage. And I think that's really, I think it's more powerful than you may even know, especially with the large following that you continue to grow, which really leads me into your future. And I'm really curious. Some may say that you've done it all in terms of the entrepreneurship world. There's always something to do, but I'm really curious, what's next for David S. Rose?
Well, so to answer that question, you got to go back and say, what is the future? How long is the future, right? What is your vision of yourself? Starting with how long is yourself going to be around, right? What is your life expectancy? And
right.
So I have found in my life that different people's take on the future has an enormous amount to do with how long they think they're going to live and where are they in their life story, right? Life expectancy. There are people in my class, my high school class, my college class, my business school class. There are quite a few people who are now retired and living in a retirement community in Florida. I mean, I can no more imagine retiring than, literally flapping my wings and flying to the moon. It is, beyond my comprehension, right? I mentioned my father is now 91 friggin' years old, and he is currently fully engaged. He's now working on developing the Du Bois Center in Ghana. He just got several $100,000 from Bank of America to fund the initial stuff on that. Retire. Who retire? I understand. I intellectually understand that for some people, if you think, I get to whatever 65 and my life expectancy is 75, so I might as well take those 10 years to do things I couldn't do for the rest of my previous. Well, wait a minute. First of all, if I wanted to do something in my life, I've done it, right? I've traveled, I do things. I clearly enjoy what I'm doing. I clearly enjoy the teaching and the giving back and the starting things as an entrepreneur and helping other entrepreneurs by investing and writing and all that kind of stuff. So I'm doing what I enjoy. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. And so it's not that I've missed out on things. So there's nothing that's sort of, queued up here to do when I can stop having to work. I work because I want to work, number one. Number two, I am a firm believer. As I said, my father's 91, my mother's 90. They're still chugging away. I believe that my life expectancy, my father could be born in 1929 and have a life, he's now 91 and still going strong. Well, hey, we've had a lot of advances in technology and science since then. So I figure I'm living to at least 120, maybe 125, but at least 120. And so this isn't some theoretical anything. This is an absolute ingrained, definitive foundational belief. I believe I am going to live to at least 120. So therefore, according to my own internal clock, I've just about hit middle age. And seriously, So for me, I look ahead of me and say, instead of saying, "Oh, I'm at the tail end of my life, I better retire and move to a retirement community and start knitting or whatever it is." No, one of my other favorite entrepreneurs, a guy named Peter Sprague. Peter Sprague was an entrepreneur. He was the chairman of National Semiconductor. He was the chairman of Aston Martin. Peter's now 82, and he's starting tech startups just like every other little 22-year-old kid that I see. I mean, he's got one doing badges that do speech to text and show what you're doing. He's got all kinds of stuff, ideas. So I certainly expect that I will continue to do what I am doing. As an entrepreneur, I will believe I will continue to start companies. I will continue to teach. Part of my challenge is that I tend to be accretive rather than, I don't replace anything. And it drives my wife crazy because I probably should. So I just add things on. So I'm, founder, executive chairman of Gust. I'm CEO of the U.S. real estate market. I'm working on another book right now about real estate. I just got a contract from my publisher. I've got, all these things I add on. I probably should at some point level off. If not, I'm not going to go down, but it should level off. But so I see the rest of my career continuing to be everything that I'm doing now because I'm doing what I love doing. I love teaching and writing and answering. I love creating and investing in startups and helping people. And effectively, this is all part of a big, grand, not so much plan, but a big, grand goal to heal the world. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, you've made me feel much better. I have a huge birthday coming up next month, and now I'm wondering, really not halfway through, maybe just a third of the way through this. So the future's much brighter today.
Seriously. Yeah. The oldest person to ever live, it was, I think, 124, right? Okay, so it can happen. People have lived to 124. And that was a person who was born in, 1900 or whatever it is, right? So we don't think that medicine and our understanding of the human genome and of all these kinds of things, can do. Somebody close to me was diagnosed with cancer 11 years ago. Okay, well, you have surgery first, and then you monitor your CA-125, and then you go in for chemo, and you knock it down again, and 11 years later, still around and still kicking. Despite that, so medicine and technology have improved to the point that as long as you keep yourself in good shape, not that I'm there yet, but I'm working on it. You should be able to live a very long, healthy life. I have multiple relatives who have lived to 100 years old, and these are people who were born in before the Depression, right? So why on earth, rationally, logically speaking, shouldn't I fully expect to live to 120?
I love it. So let's switch gears to the startup ecosystem, and let's put your investor hat on for a moment. What motivates your fund to back a founder or startup?
So in my particular case, there are several things. There are several things you have to have, right? You have to look at a market where there is potential for real growth, right? If nobody is spending money in a market, in some way, not necessarily doing what you're doing, but nobody's spending money in the market, it doesn't matter how good a problem you solve, you're not going to be able to make it make sense economically, right? Number one. Number two, you have to have something that is in some way protectable. And that doesn't usually mean patents, because you can really work around a patent or license it, or patents are becoming, in that sense, except for things like drugs, less of an issue. But whether that means the particular skill set of the founder, whether it means domain expertise, whether it means you have access to a channel or a partnership, or you have the network effects of a large scale network, whatever, there is something that gives you some protectable ability to do that. A business model that is scalable, right? So you can be the world's greatest chef, and you can do El Bulli or whatever, and that's wonderful. I'd love to go eat there, but the problem is that's not scalable. You can't make 6 more, even knowing exactly what he's doing, because it requires 6 more chefs, like the guy who founded El Bulli, right? So therefore, you look for business models that are inherently scalable, that you can, once you prove it at a small scale, you can just throw in cash and you can do the same thing bigger. And more importantly, that the bigger it gets, the better it gets. For example, if I were to say, okay, John, go out and create from scratch a website to sell me a book, right? So, okay, if you had to start from absolute scratch, you have to go out and program a site and do this kind of stuff, and you have to have the book and keep it somewhere on your desk or in a warehouse. You'd have to make a FedEx shipping label to send it to me when I did it, and so on and so forth. It might cost you, 5 times the price of the book to get that one book sold to me. On the other hand, if you're Jeff Bezos, the marginal cost for you to sell a digital book is somewhere around 0. right? It's literally a digital file there that can be printed on demand to this whole thing and done it. So that's an example of a business that is absolutely scalable, and there is no limit to how big that can get. And then you can do other things and add them. So you look for a business model that is scalable, that is solving a problem in a market that is growing. And then you come down to the single most important thing. And the single most important thing is the team, is the people. Right. And in the team, you now have several things you have to get together, right? You have the skill sets around the domain expertise, understanding who your customers are and who your market is and so on and so forth. Do you have the skill sets of producing whatever you're doing, whether that is logistics people or coding engineers or designers, whatever the business you're doing? You have to have people who can actually do it. You have to have sales ability, sales and marketing, get the word out and help people understand that you're solving the problem. You need that kind of stuff, right? You need the financial end of it in terms of people who understand how business is done and HR and operational stuff and all that kind of stuff. But then on top of all that, you need the entrepreneur, capital T, capital E. That is this person we've been talking about, that 1 out of 100, who is the entrepreneur who encapsulates the vision and the passion and the storytelling and the ability to see a problem and the passion to solve it and change the world by making this one thing better. And so what I look for is ultimately, okay, I want to see all those other things I mentioned, and I want to see the team, but they're the sine qua non, that without which, there has to be the entrepreneur. And I am investing in that entrepreneur. And I don't care how young, how old, how, whatever, do I see that entrepreneur? And so I love nothing more than to find another kindred spirit, another entrepreneur. And I don't care what age they are. And right now I've been talking, I did a Facebook post the other day. I heard a podcast called What Every 13-Year-Old Should Know by a couple of 13-year-old kids who do this podcast, and they interview people about interesting things. Their subject that day happened to be a 13-year-old entrepreneur. So, okay, I'm going to listen to that. And so I listened to that. And here I am listening to that son of a gun. This 13-year-old kid, he's got like 3 businesses going on. He's training kids on how to play Dungeons and Dragons. He's got a t-shirt store online. He's doing the kind of thing. And I'm listening to this 13-year-old kid. His name is Eli Hendricks, and I'm saying, okay, that's me. I understand. I have more in common with this 13-year-old kid who is an entrepreneur than I have with 99% definitionally of the people in my own age group, right? And so we then followed up, and I had a wonderful call this weekend. We spent an hour with him and his father online discussing entrepreneurship and his kind of thing. So you love it. So I invest in the entrepreneur, and when it comes to the entrepreneur, going back to the previous question, the number one thing is integrity, right? So the foundational thing here is integrity as part of the entrepreneurial package, and the entrepreneurial package is the key thing relative to the team, and the team is the key thing relative to the overall business, which includes things like market size and scalability and business model and everything else.
So I'm so glad that you give that explanation, a comprehensive explanation, because I'm often talking to entrepreneurs and they're so focused on their business model and they forget about themselves, and that the investor, the right investor, is investing in you. And my simplified formula has always been, if you have the right team, the right model, and the right money, because you can have the wrong team, the wrong people, the wrong money. And what you're pitching here is the right money, and that you're investing in the person that knows what they're doing, that they're going to get that to the next level. And I appreciate that guidance and advice for our listening audience. And as we go into the next segue of our questioning, I'm really curious about, and I think you already answered about why startups fail, but is there a common trend or one particular thing that you see?
Startups fail for a zillion reasons, right? They succeed when everything just happens to fall into place. And as we talked about earlier in the session, there are a lot of things that can happen that are totally outside the control of the entrepreneur. There is market forces. There's a pandemic. Hello, who the heck would think that the entire world is going to shut down for a year overnight? I mean, a friend of mine is the president of Princess Cruise Lines, right? One morning, she's running around and she's got this very successful cruise line, and all these great things happening. They're introducing new ships. The next morning, the entire cruise line is out of business and all the ships are docked. Yep. What the heck? I mean, talk about a black swan. I mean, there's no way you plan for that. And that stuff happens. It's one thing to happen for a big business like an existing cruise line, which really only gets affected at that level by a global pandemic. But if you're a startup, there are a lot of things other than a pandemic that can affect you. It could be anything from a competitor opening up across the street to somebody with additional whatever having another take on it that's slightly better than yours. Somebody looking at the same problem and taking a little different take on it. It turns out that they actually had the right take and you didn't. It could be problems with the team. It could be problems where you have a right idea but nobody knows about it and you can't convince them, so that ultimately you run out of money before you can get to the product into market. There can be a million different things that can go wrong, some of which are up to you, some of which are completely exogenous to you. And that's why you got to be both visionary, idealistic, and pragmatic, which is to say, okay, if I can change it, then I'll change it. I'll do better next time. I'll learn from my lessons. And if I can, and if it was something completely outside, like a pandemic, well, okay, good. Pick myself up, dust myself off, and start all over again.
Yep. Well, it's interesting that you bring up the cruise industry because, as you know, I come from the aviation industry. That's my professional background outside of higher education. And what's interesting is this is the first time in history that airlines weren't generating revenue because nobody was flying. And people look back at 9/11, airlines were still generating revenue, and it was a small blip on the radar screen. And this is obviously a longer blip, but when you bring up the cruise line industry and the billions of dollars that have been lost and the lack of revenue that's just not flowing, I would think it's going to cause the industry to pivot and rethink how we do things, as other industries are as well. And that brings me to another, segue into the world of talent, because you need talented, skilled, qualified individuals to run these businesses. And how do you retain these employees? What keeps them motivated? And when you're in the situation like we are in right now, and I'm really just talking off the cuff right now, you spent so much time recruiting talent into your organization, and in many cases you had to let them go permanently, or they're on a temporary hold, and hopefully you're bringing them back, or we're starting to see that happen in different areas. But ultimately, my question for you is, how do you keep employees keen and motivated?
So first of all, far and away, the single most important thing is shared vision and shared faith and the integrity question, right? So it might be a conceit, but I believe that everybody who has ever worked for me in the past 40 years in my startups, right, many of which have not succeeded, people have been laid off, would come back and work for me again. I mean, if you take a look on Glassdoor and some of our rankings over there, some of the comments are, too visionary, out of touch with reality, could be more efficient, so on and so forth. But I've got 100% CEO rating, right? And so people know that A, my heart is in the right place, B, that I've got the vision, C, that I treat people fairly. And so that whole thing about everybody gets one chance to screw us, but only one, that works internally as well. And when you have a culture in the organization that starts from the top, and people are sharing a vision, and they know you are totally straight in terms of how you deal with them with high integrity. If people have, anybody who's working in a startup understands that working in a startup is not working for a major company like a cruise line. Oh, wait, if a cruise line happens to hit a pandemic, everybody gets laid off, right? But still, the thesis is, in a startup, it's more fragile than working in a larger corporation, right? And so, anybody who's working in a startup understands that stuff happens. You're taking a shot. You're doing it because you want to create something. You're with a shared vision and equity and so on and so forth. And if it doesn't work, that's not the fault of management. As long as everybody is playing from the same deck of cards, as long as people know that you're going to promote on accomplishment, and you're going to give people opportunities and not micromanage them. You give people who work in startups tend, whether they are the entrepreneur, capital T, capital E, at the top, or whether they are the entrepreneurial types, or people who are just joining and working in a startup, everybody is there to create something bigger than themselves. They want to be in on the act of creation, and that's how you get people to come in, because they share your vision. They want to change the world. They want to do something. They want you to treat them appropriately, respect them as people, give them agency to control their environment. The same things that motivate you and me, other than the crazy entrepreneurial piece, right? These are basic human things, and they will stick around often when I've had people leave, it's not just, fuck you, I'm out of here and away they go. Instead, there are these heart-rending things. I'd love to stay, but I have to feed my family. I would love to do it, but I've learned so much here. And so we have this, the Disgust Alumni Association, where people come back in our routine weekly calls. We actually have, former employees stop in and join in the calls and where are they now and update things. And so you want to have people who, and also whatever you're doing, if you're an engineer or you're a salesperson and you know that your teammates and your managers and supervisors have your back, right? If you know that if you make a decision for the right reason, nobody in any company I've ever worked for or ever run, nobody ever gets canned for making a wrong decision if it was done for the right reasons, right? If you were doing it to be fair, to play fair, I don't care what it is. People make mistakes. God knows I make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but it's doing it for the right reasons. Nobody gets fired for making the wrong decision for the right reasons. On the other hand, people absolutely do get fired for making the right decision for the wrong reasons. I had one controller, whatever it's got, probably 30 years ago, who very proudly came to me and said, "Oh well, yeah, sure, I just saved us $10,000 on our taxes by saying we did X, Y, or Z." And I looked at him and I said, "But we're not doing X, Y, and Z." "Well, yeah, but we said that." I said, and this was a nice guy. I said, "I love you. That's great. I appreciate that you want to help the company. But no, that's not the way we roll. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, you're fired because we simply cannot have that." And it hurt me, it hurt him, but you have to do it that way.
Absolutely. It's funny. And again, the stories are really helping, I think, with our audience in terms of key messaging. I remember I worked for an organization where I was told I was too innovative or too entrepreneurial. And that was why I was brought into the organization, was to be that innovative person. But they block you, right? The culture didn't adapt to innovation. So I'm so appreciative of the role that I'm in now, because that's what it's all about. There are no rules in terms of innovation, right? There is no boundary, and great things start to happen. And I appreciate all of that background information that you gave. As we enter into the last 5 minutes of our discussion, which I know we could talk for hours, and you have no idea how much we're alike, but I look forward to future discussion. I'm really curious is, when you look, about our innovation center that we're creating here. So as the Levan Center embarks on our own startup journey to support the startup ecosystem, what advice would you offer us and other resources in terms of how we can support founders through that entire life cycle?
So there are a couple of different things, right? And you have to meet your founders where they come, where they are, right? And so, and that means getting back to our original thing about who should be an entrepreneur, that anybody can, but everybody shouldn't, is on the one hand, on the everybody can piece of it, that means that somebody who is that natural born entrepreneur, that 1 in 100, if you have to go in assuming that is evenly distributed. It's evenly distributed by gender, it's evenly distributed by skin color, it's evenly distributed by place of origin, by whatever, right? Orientation, the whole 9 yards. And so if it is evenly distributed, which I firmly believe that it is, and then you look at the other end at the percentage of venture capital dollars that go, for example, to Black female founders, when you have less than 1%, if you say, okay, I believe that the incidence of natural entrepreneurs is as much among Black female founders as against white male founders, right? So what's going on here? So there clearly is an issue, and it's not just that every VC is a racist, whatever it is, not trying to do it. That's clearly not the case. And these days, most VCs have programs, diversity programs, where they are trying to do this, right? There is a problem in the entire ecosystem, and you are working on an ecosystem play. So the first thing to do is to identify those natural entrepreneurs wherever they are, whether they have a fifth generation entrepreneur like me, or somebody who hasn't a clue and they feel like they're the ugly duckling in their family of ducks. They're a swan, but nobody's ever seen a swan, so you don't know what the heck an entrepreneur is. So to help identify those people, to provide them with role models and a vision that, hey, entrepreneurship for those for whom it is a thing, and you can do it. And so get them up, then provide them with role models, identify and provide them with role models, provide them with the tools and the infrastructure, the mentoring, the training, and the financing to do that. So that's one of the things you can do for the ecosystem. And the other thing at the other end, when under the heading of not everybody should be a startup, is to try and figure out when people come into you, okay, Are you really the entrepreneur, whether the natural born or the self-made, right? Or are you entrepreneurial and should work in a team? And in my experience, this is a binary, clear as day thing. I can look at somebody and talk to them for half an hour and know exactly on which side of the divide they're falling, right? And somebody who should not start a company, you shouldn't push them into starting a company. You shouldn't train them, oh, yes, you can do this, if they're not that kind of person. That person should be working with the other person as part of a team. It's a great book by Jeff Busgang, or another friend of mine, called Entering Startup Land, which is all about people who are not the founders. So my book, The Startup Checklist, 25 Steps to a Scalable High Growth Business, should be the Bible, I would say modestly, for any entrepreneur who is starting a business. Jeff's book, Entering Startup Land, is for everybody else who would be working in those businesses, understanding the various roles and how you do it. And I think that to the extent that the center can actually help people understand that there are two different paths to working in that startup world. There is the actual entrepreneurial startup, and then there is the startup team to do that. I think that would be an enormous contribution to the ecosystem.
I appreciate that. I've taken some notes here and grateful for that feedback. So we have about a minute left, and what I'd like to ask you, is there one question that you've not been asked that you're just burning to answer?
As you can tell, I tend to spew anyway. And so I guess maybe it would be something along the lines of, is entrepreneurship, good or bad? These days, there's a lot of stuff in Washington about how all these tech, entrepreneurs are ruining the world and they're running our lives, and we should, get rid of big tech and so on and so forth. And I firmly believe that entrepreneurs are the engine of society. I think all developments in history have been done by entrepreneurs. I'm a great capitalist. I believe in Adam Smith's invisible hand, and Adam Smith wrote that by serving his own purposes, the entrepreneur, the founder, by creating something for him, does a better job at solving society's problems in the world than somebody who sets out to solve society's problems. So I am a great believer in entrepreneurship. I think it is great for the ecosystem. I think entrepreneurs, are very special people, not better or worse, but very special people. But I think they are the people who change the world.
Well, I cannot thank you enough, David, for participating in today's Fireside Chat. And I thank you for everything that you do supporting innovation, technology, entrepreneurship. You are welcome back anytime, and we'll certainly follow you on all the different social media channels and look forward to future engagement. And you have an open invitation to come visit us at any time when you're able to escape New York, and not to retire to South Florida, but to come and visit South Florida. But thank you again. Really can't say thank you enough for everything in this hour. It went by way too fast.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. I think you're doing an amazing thing. I think, I've done a lot of reading now about the center. As you know, I think the conception was right. I think you're implementing it correctly. You got the right team. You got a great team that we've been working with. And I think you're going to have a real impact on the whole ecosystem down there. And I would love to be a part of this and help in any way I can.
Well, that's our goal, is to better link the South Florida innovation ecosystem, and we're already moving a mountain. So thank you again for your interest and support. The Alan B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation will open this summer. In the meantime, we are offering scheduled virtual events, and you can view our calendar by visiting our webpage at nova.edu/innovation, or you can email us at innovation@nova.edu, or you can call our hotline, and our friendly operators are standing by at 954-262-TECH. That's TECH. Don't forget to check us out on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you for joining us today. Stay safe and healthy, and this concludes today's Fireside Chat. And thank you again, David. Really appreciate it. All right. Wow. Thank you. That was great.